Well, thank you very much, Greg, for the introduction, and good morning, everybody. My name is Harald Großmann. I'm with Dresden University of Technology, and I was responsible for work package 4, the objective of which is shown here, improved collection strategies in Central Europe. What am I supposed to do? There we are. Okay, so the objective of work package 4 is shown here and was already briefly mentioned by Graziano. Objective was to develop recommendations for improving existing or initially installing collection systems, taking into account all major local and regional principal variables crucial for the success. And the main thing we had to do was to identify the various wishes and desires of the major stakeholders. We just had a nice experience here on the stage just a few minutes ago, where we had already a very intensive exchange of largely differing ideas of how to organize collection system. The content of my presentation is shown here. I will go a bit into details of the stakeholders' area of conflict, which makes everything so difficult when it comes to identifying the best solution. Then conclusions for better collection strategies based on the data which we collected in different ways. Thirdly, recommendations of what kind of collection strategy could be the appropriate one for a given situation. And then a very short description of the tool for decision finding. So we have automized it in some way. Our original idea was slightly different. We had hoped that we could go into the details of all of the 63 regions which exist in Central Europe to characterize each of those and to find on this basis a limited number of model regions on which we would work intensively in order to describe them or define all their characteristics which can have some input on or influence on the way used paper and board products should be collected. But this was our vision, and we had to accept after a while, we had to realize that in particular the availability and the existence of reliable statistical data was anything but self-evident. So we had to develop strategies to collect the data we needed for eventually coming to the recommendations. So in the first place, let's have a look at the stakeholders' area of conflict, and this is something which Graziano already mentioned. So we have the recycling question and how to collect the paper, and then there are a number of items which are discussed between the stakeholders, like, for example, pricing of recovered paper, pricing for the installed collection system, the consumer behavior and the way it can influence the consumer's behavior, those are very important questions. Then the struggle about quality standards. We don't have, well, we have in the meantime in some parts of Europe more or less agreed quality standards in the first place set up in Gede, but they are by far not applied everywhere in Central Europe. Investment costs for collection systems is also and financing these investment costs is also a very hot issue in this discussion. Legislation is something which can normally not be influenced or not largely influenced by the stakeholders, but it has, of course, a very strong effect. Contracting means contracts between municipalities in the first place and waste management companies. Well, openers or well-placed markets both exist. These are the not by far not all, but maybe the main topics which are relevant in the discussion between the stakeholders. And the stakeholders, as Graziano already said, are three. If we leave out the consumer, which of course would be a very important stakeholder. But the stakeholders which we would like to define a bit more in detail are, in the first place, the paper mills, because it's their raw material we talk about. Then we have the waste management companies, and we have the municipalities. So, but why are there conflicts in this area here? The conflicts result from the different objectives of these stakeholders, and they are, when as soon as we look at the paper mills in the first place, quality of recovered paper, which is, among many others, also a function of the collection system. Another important issue for the paper mills, of course, is also quantity, because they need a certain amount of recovered paper and collected paper suitable for recycling. But I think the predominant desire is to receive an acceptable quality or quality fit for the purpose, which can differ quite a lot. Then the municipalities, their main wish is to collect huge quantities for two reasons. They can, in some cases, make some money out of that, and on the other hand, they are responsible for getting rid of all what is called waste. We, or most of us, at least I think, we don't believe that newspaper board products are waste, but well, they are dealt in the waste management by waste management companies, and the most important issue is profitability. They have to be able to work profitably in order to make the investments which are necessary for a well-functioning collection system. So this is the area in which the decision with respect to the most appropriate collection system should take place, and I would like to go a bit into the details of what is important for these various stakeholders. Let's start with the municipalities, because they are in many cases the decision makers. Their main objective, as I said, is quantities. Now, if we look at the development in recent years, we see that that some changes happened. Without defining what recent years is, I would say that's maybe the last 5 to 10 years. But you see here for 4 countries from Central Europe: Austria, Germany, Italy, and Poland. The development of collection rates. The green columns show you cases in the different countries where the collection rates were increased. This can have very, very different and many different reasons, but if you look at all those 4, we can really say that there was, basically in all countries, a rather positive development in terms of the increase in collection rates. This, however, was not to the same extent true for improving quality or for the development of quality. So that means, while in most, or at least these are the larger Central European countries, the collection rates for paper and board went up in recent years, the quality became worse in most cases. And this can surely not alone, but to some extent also be attributable to the inappropriate collection systems, or not optimized collection systems. Okay, so as I said, originally we wanted to characterize the regions and then look into each and every region and identify what kind of collection system, if any, is installed in the region and what the result would be. This was not the right way, as we had to learn, because the data wasn't available, and this also has to be stated that it is really difficult, because we had to switch to telephone calls. We had to develop questionnaires, send out to the municipalities, to paper mills, to waste paper merchants, and again we had to learn that a dialogue between these stakeholders does not really take place in many parts of Central Europe, and that collecting even soft information from these sources is also anything but easy. So we try to develop strategies which allowed us in the end to make recommendations, and this is one of those, the result of one of those activities. It shows you the correlation between the collection system, or the type of a collection system, and the recycling rate. So this is a spider-web diagram where we have here this arrow. Which one? Okay, so great. Yeah, we have the increasing rate, the arrow shows the direction of increasing recycling rates as a function of the various collection system, and here you see the symbols for the different countries. So we looked at, or we categorized the existing collection system into recycling yard, public container mixed grades, public container separate grades, collection shops, paper bins mixed grade, on-site container separate grades, and curbside collections. And what becomes quite obvious from these results here, which were obtained from telephone calls and from questionnaires, that there is no conclusion. You can obtain a very satisfying recycling rate with virtually any of these collection systems, and at the same time you can obtain a very lousy recycling rates as well with virtually any of these systems. But if you look at the result in a diagram like here on the right hand side, you see that the collection rate, well, this is what we already knew, for Germany is highest and Austria is very close, then comes Italy. But we have the whole range of recycling rates in Europe, and we just learned with the last presentation that the rate, if I understood it correctly, for Poland is not 39 but 45, which is much better, obviously, than the value we had when we started the project. So we have an increase in recycling rates, but we don't have, well, this is a more detailed view of the same results. I will not go into the details. I think the message is quite clear, it's confusing. So again, this is nothing else but the fact that we don't see a very strong correlation between the recycling rate or the quantity of collected paper as a function of the collection system. All these 2 and 3 and 4 liter, 2 and 3 letter abbreviations, they characterize different collection systems. And in the case, if you look at the right-hand side here, where we have KS, PB, PCS, RY, and CS, the abbreviations are explained on the right-hand side. We see that even if you install all collection system one can think of, the result can be, well, in between very good and very bad. This is the correlation, the same correlation as we've seen before, but we skipped some of the respondents for a number of reasons which I will not discuss right now. And then we see a slight tendency, but again very difficult to explain. Okay, let's have a further look to the view of the paper mills as the purchaser of the recovered or the collected paper, and their main issue is the quality of the collected papers. Again, we have here the correlation between the type of the collection system on one hand and the satisfaction of the paper mills with the quality they receive from these collection systems. Again, the increasing satisfaction, the direction, and again the same collection systems, recycling yard, and so on. Again, no strong correlation. For example, if you look at Germany, you can expect, in one case at least, excellent results with paper bins for mixed grades. On the other hand, if you go to collection shops, it's well, medium quality, or medium quality in this case, satisfaction for paper mills, main issue is quality. And recycling yards as well perform as well in some cases as paper bins. So again, no strong correlation, but that would not allow us to say or to make a recommendation for communities, for municipalities in Central Europe, which are still seeking for the most appropriate collection system for their very region. You cannot tell them your decision should be on recycling yard or on paper bins where you collect mixed grades. There is no clear conclusion which can be drawn from these results. But this is something which we did not expect. But I think it becomes clear how difficult it was to draw the right conclusions from all these data collected. what is maybe what makes one a bit optimistic is that the satisfaction of the paper mills with the collected paper and board for recycling was not so bad. It was, we had no really bad results, and the majority was even in the range of very good or good. So there is not much wrong with these different strategies, but there is room, quite some room for improvements. Yeah, what type of problems, as there were any, did occur? So this is now data which we selected from different countries by questionnaires and by telephone calls. It's not really representative. For example, if you look at countries like Poland, where we had only 4 respondents, and half of them had their main problems with unusable material, while the other had problems with non-paper components or the adverse paper properties. If we look at countries where we have a certain statistical security, like Germany, it becomes clear that unusable materials is the winner, so to say. So most problems which occurred in German mills, if they occurred anywhere related to unusable material. High moisture is in no cases a hot issue as it used to be a couple of, well, at least 2 decades ago maybe. So this is no longer an issue, maybe because it's quite easy to measure this very important property. Okay, and here you see the distribution over all the respondents, because these are only 4 countries, where altogether we had 48 responses, and this graph on the left-hand side shows you the distribution of the problems under those 48. And here we have again unusable material as the most important, and the non-paper components came in second. So this is also something which we have to keep in mind when the final decision of a collection system has to be made. And then again, soft facts, because there was a severe lack of hard facts. The ideas we collected from paper mills, their ideas with respect to how paperboard recycling collection could be improved, they were very diverse. So storage in halls, which is, well, self-evident in many cases, but obviously not in all, was mentioned. Then better sorting at waste management companies, better education and information plus awareness, so increasing the awareness of society, which is undoubtedly a very important prerequisite, and has already been mentioned here. Then recording and traceability of the waste the recovered paper or the used paper and board goes, product goes. Training of sorting staff, well, this is also something which should be self-evident, because once a sorting strategy is installed somewhere, that the people who work there, they should be well trained to be able to identify what should be separated and what not. Then separate collection of paper and board and graphic paper for recycling. This is something which was already discussed slightly. I think it's a very important issue, but we have to accept that, of course, this is connected to a higher effort when it comes to recycling, to recover paper, to collect paper. But it surely makes sense if a paper mill which first uses recovered paper, graphic papers, is in the vicinity or is in the region, then it makes sense to collect it separately. Not necessarily in all cases. Then, well, no public collection containers. Obviously, the respondent in this case had very bad experiences with public collection containers. And better sorting at source. That means sorting, or the quality of paper is made at home. This is also one of the conclusions, one of the important conclusions we learned. Because we are only talking, I forgot to mention that, about household or paper and board collected from households. So these are very diverse ideas, but they apply by far not to no matter which place in Central Europe. But some of those comments came from special circumstances, reaching with very special circumstances. And those who make the decision in the end what kind of collection system should be installed in a region, they should really have an open air for these comments. Because some of them can quite easily be taken into consideration when the decision is made. So then waste management companies as service providers, their main objective is they have to be profitable, they have to be allowed to work profitably in order to provide the services they are expected to do in the most appropriate way. And most appropriate way, at least for the municipalities, means that they collect as much paper and board as possible, and for the paper mills that they provide the highest quality needed in the region. Okay, so these are just two examples, were both in Germany, statements concerning economic aspects of collection and sorting. First example is Berlin, case of an automatic sorting plant, which is a state-of-the-art plant, so a rather modern one. Collection are determined by cost for logistics. That's again self-evident because cost of logistics are always very important costs in collecting paper or any kind of waste. Profitability, and that is when things become more difficult, largely depend on external factors which cannot be influenced, or at least not strongly be influenced, by the service providers. In that case, in an automatic sorting plant, which of course has certain restrictions with respect to flexibility, but it can be operated possibly once the investments were made cheaper than a manual sorting system. With respect to quality, there was little undesired material and a visually good quality for the paper mills. The second example is from Dresden in East Germany. In this case, it was manual sorting of paper for recycling from graphic paper containers. So there were already graphic paper containers installed in that place. With respect to collection, 2 collection tours needed for separate containers. Paper bin is more economical, that was the comment. With respect to profitability, it's profitable only for already separately collected graphic papers because manual work is expensive. And once you have a container for graphic paper, you must not expect there is only graphic paper in that very container. It can also contain other papers which are not suitable for, in that case, the inking purposes most probably. Quality in graphic containers, 90% graphic papers and 10% mis-sorting. In the paper bin it was much smaller, 2 to 5% undesired material. And that means the 90% cannot be accepted by paper mills. They have to sort it manually, or it has to be sorted manually before it comes to the paper mill. Okay, so a few remarks with respect to the challenges for waste management industry in Germany. We just had the example of the automated sorting plant in Berlin. One of the experiences not only with that one was that as soon as automation goes up, if you have a highly automated system, then normally the flexibility goes down because flexibility can only be provided at the moment at least by humans. The proportion of scrap papers goes down. That means this is a certain challenge because in cases where it goes down dramatically, it maybe is no longer really efficient to sort it manually, or far too expensive to sort it manually because the output is too small. And very much in the same area, the price gap between mixed and the inking grades is or has been decreasing over the last years. This was also a comment and a challenge mentioned by the waste management companies in Germany. There are a number of other facts like short contract durations with municipalities which make it extremely difficult to finance investments which are necessary for a well-functioning collection system, and strong competition results in small margins. Additional competition by paper mills, the waste managers very understandably don't like these very close cooperation between paper mills and local authorities and municipalities. The last point here, increasing thefts and frauds, is a very special thing which at the moment at least only appears in places where someone is awarded for collecting paper. Or in cases where you have to pay for getting rid, the consumer has to pay to get rid for his own paper for recycling. And many of the service providers, they complain about poor to non-existing planning securities, which is the result of too short contract durations. If you have a contract duration of, say, 1 or 2 years between waste management company and municipality, there's no planning security. They will not be prepared to invest in modern sorting technology, for example, and thus they will not be prepared to install a very efficient system. Challenges for waste management industry in Poland. So this is waste management in general, but also we, of course, look at the first place to paper and board recycling. And we already heard that Poland is one of the big countries with almost 40 million people, but with a rather low, at the moment at least, even if it's at 45%, a rather low collection rate. There is something where something could or should happen. Focus at the moment, as we learned from our questionnaires, from our phone interviews, on organizational challenges, like municipalities are free to decide about the level of waste separation. This is something which we just had in a brief discussion after the last presentation. Then often no sorting at point of collection, low quality of paper for recycling is the result. And this may also be generated by unconscious ignorance of requirements by municipalities. If they are not in contact with the paper mills to learn what the requirements of the paper mills are, those who have to recycle the paper, they may come to unconsciously to wrong decisions. Now, effective control of waste management streams by authority, well, one can doubt that this is very important, but from a point of statistics or reliable statistics, which are extremely important in order to develop the right idea for a given country, in particular for a country where the gap between the recycling rate in Europe and this country is as high as it is in Poland, are of course important. And this can only, or reliable statistics can only be generated if the local authorities are aware of where the paper goes. Okay, then often low technical standards of sorting plants, and this is again, of course, a question of readiness to invest in new technology, or a question of the cost of paper recycling. A relatively low environmental awareness and too little incentives of citizens to separate recyclable fractions. This is something which I cannot assess, but this is a response which we received from our interviews. And this is something where, of course, education can do a lot. So these were a few examples just to show you on what basis of information, unfortunately not too many hard facts, but a lot of soft facts, we drew conclusions in the end, and on the basis of which we then developed a tool which I will briefly present in the last part of the presentation. So, what were the conclusions we came to on the basis of the results we achieved? Differences and competing objectives make the identification of ideal solutions very difficult. I think that became quite obvious. There are two antipodes which can easily be identified. One is here shown on the left-hand side, separation plus control. If you want to have that, then you should decide for a recycling yard or collection shop system. On the other hand, if you want to have a very high comfort, in particular for the consumers, then the paper bin undoubtedly is the best solution. And there are many solutions in between, where a municipality or a region which has to make a decision with respect to the best collection system and these are public containers for separate grades, public containers for mixed grades, on-site container mixed grades, and curbside collection. But all they have also direct influences on the quality of the paper which is collected. So I already had that no clear indication from data and other sources that a specific collection system is the best one. There is no way to state that. We have a broad variety of different, and we have to make very, very specified decisions, and decisions which take into consideration the circumstances given a region. Yes, the assessment depends upon particular stakeholder groups, that is the stakeholders which were mentioned. Due to time reason, I will skip that. It is just a very brief survey of what kind of other influential factors have to be considered, like social situation, economic incentives, but I will not go, as I said, because we will touch a few of them later when it comes to the recommendations. This is another example for which we can draw. Of course, we can draw conclusions. It's statistics which we collected from southern Lower Saxony in Germany, and it shows you the fraction of recyclables only for paper and board in residual waste. Because the higher the fraction of paper and board and residual waste from households is, the larger is the problem with the collection system, because this is an indication that the collection system is either not effective or is not accepted by the society in the region. So for, again, southern Lower Saxony, it was found that the amount in kilograms per capita and year of paper and board in residual waste was 4.7 kilo overall in whole southern Lower Saxony. It was as low as 3.1 in rural areas. It was 4.1 in small towns, both lower than the average in the whole region. It was already significantly higher than the average in urban regions or urban situations, and in even larger urban situations. That means greater agglomerations of housing. It was already twice that of the smaller urban regions. That means having 30.8 kilo. That's what I now pressed exactly the button I was told I should press. That's a long way now.
Yes, I know.
Oh, here we go. Yes. If you have a situation where 30.8 kilograms of paper and board per capita and year is found in residual waste, that's a lot. So this is definitely a region where the collection system installed, if they say, is anything but the optimum. But you see that there are huge differences with respect to the kind of housing situation. So rural areas are the best. Maybe they use their paper for different purposes, which not necessarily have something to do with paper recycling. These are informations which we did not get, of course. Okay, yes, well, the recommendations we eventually established were in particular aiming at reducing the area of conflicts between the main stakeholders, finding the right compromise for a given situation, and of course, at the same time, that means simultaneously improving waste management strategies. So, reducing the area of conflicts. Now, there will come a number of different recommendations, which I will not discuss in detail because I'm afraid we won't have the time. But anyway, I think all these presentations will be published on the webpage of EcoPaperLoop. Yeah, let's have a brief look at contracting and concepts, which I already mentioned. Long-term contracts between communities and waste management companies. Well, preferably 10 years. This is, of course, a comment which came to one of the waste management groups. 10 years maybe is a bit long, but 1 year is definitely far too short in order to establish and to invest in the necessary state-of-the-art technology. Then tripartite agreement between local authorities, paper mills, waste management companies, so they all should sit together and discuss their problems before their requirements before they become real problems. So to balance the interests of the different stakeholders. Transparent contract design, separation of collection and distribution, sales. That means sales. Well, transparency transparency is something which we also experience with anything but self-evident. I think even more than in many other areas. But this is something which needs a long-term strategy to solve. And well, this is another idea, rethink public-private partnership for sorting plant, particularly for urban and metropolitan areas where we have found these high amounts of paper and board and residual waste from households. The inclusion of regional industry in waste management concepts of municipalities, that is in particular important for such a vulnerable raw material or such a vulnerable recyclable one, like paper. In contrast, for example, plastic material or glass, paper is far more vulnerable. That means used paper and board because you can destroy virtually all the important properties of paper once it's collected wrongly. CPA has also developed specifications for tendering the collection of paper for recycling, which should be taken into consideration. Communication and education, public relation activities for local use of PFR by municipalities. There is a lot ongoing already in many parts of Europe, but in many other parts there is still a lot of room for improvements. On the right-hand side we have an example from Austria, where municipalities or the Steiermark, the region of Steiermark, informs the consumers that there are paper mills who are prepared to use the raw material as precious raw material. That helps a lot to improve awareness of the society and the readiness to participate in collection systems. Again, communication, that is what I already mentioned, enhance the dialogue between all major stakeholders, for example by installing a forum with meetings on a regular basis. Maybe once a year would do, but it's important to, as early as possible, discuss potential discrepancies and find a solution before it really turns out to be a major problem. Education of other stakeholders, well, this is something for waste management companies and municipalities. And the same here about quality standards are very important when it comes to this education issue. And there, for example, the indigenous methods, which are, in the meantime, since long accepted in many parts of Central Europe, could be very instrumental. I have to hurry on a bit. Legislation and other aspects. We will have legislation later today, I think, so only a few remarks. Obligations for implementation of recycling targets. I will come back to that later when I will introduce the tool which we developed. Clear rules concerning responsibility is surely extremely instrumental for establishing the functioning collection system. That means to guarantee collection independent from market price, to cover cost investments for infrastructure, and to mind lengthy litigation. And also the dual system, which was installed in Germany almost or even more than 20 years ago, and which turned out to work quite nicely, is also one of the solutions which could help to improve, in that case, in particular, packaging collection. Countrywide or European-wide standardized minimum waste separation. Well, this is a very, very complex question, and maybe we can have a discussion about that during the day. I don't have the time to go into the details. Support of development of useful waste management technologies, which are instrumental to reach the recycling rates desired, for example, through tax incentives or payments to sorting plants, which have to deal with commingled material. Okay, this is again self-evident, waste logistics. No commingled collection. This is something which was already discussed earlier today. Definitely no commingled collection for paper for recycling with other recyclable fractions. And the reason, the very, very obvious reason, is that paper and board is so vulnerable as compared to other recyclables. Most user-friendly collection system for available space, short waste, is, well, this takes into account the wishes and desires of the society. Mixture of pick-up and bring systems. This was one of the conclusions of results of the chart I showed earlier, where we had slightly better results when, in terms of recovery rate in situations where a number of different strategies were chosen. Well, this is quite self-evident. Underground containers, they are popping up in Italy and also in Slovenia, in Ljubljana, as I learned, and they are a good solution, although I don't believe that it is a solution which can be installed everywhere so that the consumer has only 150 meters to the next collection point. Okay, let's rush through that. Reward citizens for good quality for recycling. Not much money can be made with used paper and board from households, but nevertheless, it turned out we had another project a couple of years ago, and it turned out that there are parts of Europe, not necessarily in Central Europe, where rewarding the consumers can help to increase the recycling rates, the recovery rates at least. Yeah, well, these are very detailed recommendations which should be taken into consideration in order to be sure that a new system or an existing system is improved in the right way. These are again examples for well, making the collection system more visible to the society and re-identifiable for the society, so that they are really convinced or get gradually convinced that it is an important thing what happens there. These are examples from the Czech Republic and another one from Ostfalika in Poland, where information is given to the people living in the region of how the collection system works. A special solution, well, I know I will skip that now for good reasons. A few words to the tool for decision finding, which was one of the major objectives of Work Package 4. So we decided, as we were not able to collect sufficient hard facts, we decided to establish what we call a decision tree. It is based on a sort of a questionnaire with the whole process starts, or which is integrated in the process, by which the one who wants to identify the best solution for his very region has to fill in the main characteristics in terms of age structure, of income, of educational level, of infrastructure issues, and a number of others, which are important to fully or as largely as possible describe the situation given in a region, which allows to draw hopefully the right conclusions for the system to be installed. So it starts, for example, with a very simple question: is there at all a collection system for paper for recycling collection? If this is not the case, so then we go here to the right-hand side, and there comes a lot of questions then after that, dealing, well, aiming at finding the best suited collection system. If there is already one installed, then we have to ask at the collection collection rate which has been achieved with this existing strategy. And then already here it becomes difficult, because if you don't have statistics, you don't have collected them over a couple of years, they normally are not available or they are not meaningful. But this is a crucial question, because you have to compare it with your regional or your national average. And we, by developing this idea, this decision tree, we believe that something should be done if in a region the national average is not achieved. So that is why this question is so important. Well, if they are better, then we can say, in the best case, no, there is no need to do anything. In fact, in the meantime, we have a quite different, slightly different look. So we compared not to the national average, but to a number which we calculate on the basis of European standard or European average and an average. And we should aim at reaching at least half the gap between the national level in a given region, in a nation, half the gap between the national and the European statistics. Okay, and these target rates, which are shown here on the right-hand side, you see the second column shows the recycling rates, which have already been shown earlier today, and on the right-hand side we have defined, according to our ideas, when establishing this decision tree, the target rates for the different countries. So this is, in many cases, we did not, as you see, we did not take the 45, which we learned earlier today, but we took the 39 Graziano mentioned, and on the basis of that we have defined a target value for Poland of 54. If it is 45, it's a bit higher, of course. Yes, and the question of how many paper and board is still to be found in residual waste rate does not belong to, has been calculated or chosen on the basis of this of these statistics which are shown here. So this shows you the amount of the paper fraction, paper and board is blue, which is in all cases below 5%. So once it's higher than 5% in a given region, then something has to be done, or should be done. Yeah, well, here you see the example for example, for Dresden Neustadt, which is part of Dresden. Building structure, this is one of the questions, because it's important to know what kind of building structure prevails in a given region in order to find the right system. In that case, it's rented flats and apartment buildings. This is one of the options which we offer to those who fill in this decision tree. Transport infrastructure is average for a city, because we already have defined that as a city. Mobility per 1,000 inhabitants, but this is the number of cars per 1,000 inhabitants, which is taken as an indication for the mobility of the society. Living in the region, income is in that case average for Saxony or Germany. Age is more than 38, so a very young region in Dresden. And education is higher than the average, because there live a lot of students and young, well-educated people. And once you've done that, and once you have answered a certain number of additional questions, receive something like that, which is shown on the right-hand side. Suitable collection system for your situation. In this case, for Dresden Neustadt, for example, we will normally not end up with just one solution, but because I mentioned quite frequently during my presentation, there are normally more than one. Which can be the appropriate one to choose for a given region, and there are explanations why this is considered to be a good one. Okay, I already ate up half of your coffee break, and I apologize for that, but I do hope that you understood, or I was able to transfer the message of our work package 4 activities. And I must admit, this decision tree is not finished entirely, but we have another 29 days to go, because the project ends only on the 31st of December. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Harald. So we have our coffee break now. Let's maybe agree that any questions for Harald can be on a coffee break, so that we more or less keep to our schedule. So I propose that we meet here again something like 11:05.